Hey there, guys. Thanks for joining us. Welcome right into the studio. You're tuned right into the Hidden Entrepreneur Show. I am your host, Josh Cary. Our guest today is the chief strategist of Sync Digital Solutions, which is a top-performing advertising and branding agency specializing in websites, SEO, and digital marketing. Really cool. He's also produced over, get this, 500 events. We'll hear all about that. And is a published author and creator of what looks to be a million. I see 6 zeros next to the 1. 1 million plus pieces of online content annually. We'll also get to the bottom of all of that. Let's meet this beast of a man who can certainly get things done. Right there, it's Mr. Jay Hall. What's going on, Jay?
Not too much.
Good. Let's see if we can change a little bit of that. So certainly on paper, you have a nice list of credentials. You've gotten things done. We're going to dissect all of these little pieces, but one thing in particular stuck out from me, from the person who is a lifelong entrepreneur, you, of course, and this really, the connection doesn't surprise me per se, but I want to hear about it. You ran for political office?
I did.
Shall we begin there?
Start with the good stuff. Okay, yeah, sure. We can begin there. What do you want to know?
You tell me. What happened? What did you run for?
I ran for MLA, which is part of, so in the States, this would be like your state representative, essentially. After a long career behind the scenes in politics, I allowed the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and a couple friends convinced me to run in front of politics. So I'd worked a couple mayoral campaigns. I worked on a federal campaign for Stephen Harper. I worked on the Obama campaign in 2008. And then worked on the federal Justin Trudeau campaign when he ran for Prime Minister. Provincial campaign came up. 2 Americans. It's like having a state campaign. And they asked me to run. So I did. I announced, and 24 hours later, I was embroiled in a massive international scandal, which led me to resign. I couldn't even get into my condo because the reporters were everywhere, even though we have a non-paparazzi clause in our law. And it was interesting because it forced me to reinvent myself.
Great. A couple of questions. What year was this?
2016.
Okay. And what was the nature of your work behind the scenes with the Prime Minister and all these others?
Largely social media based. But in the early days before social media, I was always the young guy that the mayoral candidate at the time, Sam Cates, would have at every door. So if somebody answered the door under 25, I would talk to them, So that was a cool entry into politics. And then it was always social media. I did event coordination on a volunteer basis for the Obama campaign in Las Vegas. And then I worked in Grant Park on election night and DC for the inauguration. And then for the Justin Trudeau campaign, it was all social media.
Okay. And before we get into the scandal and that point of interest, do you find that being an entrepreneur and politics is a natural fit?
I'd like to say it is, but after doing it, no, it's not. Especially when you're an entrepreneur involved in entertainment and writing and, writing fictional books. And I had at that time in 2012, which is where the scandal originated from, I had a late night talk show here in Canada. So there was a lot going on, a lot of personalities to balance on my Twitter feed, and that's what led to my problems.
That's
Twitter.
What led to your what? What'd you say?
That's what led to the problems.
99 problems, as they say?
118 problems.
Yeah, 118. So what happened? You ran, and what happened 24 hours later?
So some tweets came up. So essentially the competition took some tweets out of context. They took away so basically I would post, let's say, a quote from one of my books or from something I wrote or from the talk show, and I would post a link to the episode or to the book. They took the link out and then just made it look like it was something I was just saying on my own. And so it ended up turning into this thing where I was called Manitoba's misogynist. which is a great title. And that's the name of my province, by the way, for people who don't know. And it was really, I had written a book about a guy having a really hard time in the dating world. And excerpts of the book were taken, put into my Twitter feed, and then a link to the book. And that's how things end up unraveling. But the media, a lot of times, likes to run the more sensational side of a story and leave the boring details out. And so that's what ended up happening.
Wow, that's actually amazing. So you arrived in that you had a title. They titled you that misogynist.
They did, yeah. And CNN ran it, MSNBC ran it, Fox ran it. Everybody outside of Canada ran it as, what's the big problem? And everybody in Canada ran it like, oh my God, what's happening? And then Trump won that year, right? So
So they thought they got you by taking things out of context and then positioning you as a misogynist who must be beaten down.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, I think the lesson I took away from this, and the lesson most people should take away, is context matters. And they never look at the media because they're so quick. Cause we've done this to ourselves. 24-hour news cycles and constant clickbait. We've forced them to not have to do there's no investigative journalism in your basic headline story, right? It's just, let's look at what we think we know and publish it. So if you looked at my full body of work, I have a pretty active blog, and at least 50% of my content is geared towards love for family, love for my girlfriends, whoever they may be at the time, love for just community. I did a lot of blogs about the way dating is going and how unscrupulous it is. So not looking at the full body work, just looking at these little excerpts that the rival party had fed to the media, it ended up creating a problem. But then I posted a blog that had context. It was the most shared piece of content locally in our city that year. And that was able to at least clear it up for a lot of people. Some people, there's nothing you can do, but for most people, it cleared it up.
When this happened, were you, at least in the beginning, were you absolutely devastated? What kind of emotional impact did this have?
Well, I come from a pretty accepting family. So if you'd seen the parties my parents would throw, every race, everybody came. We're a very multicultural home. So having an ist, misogynist, attached to my name was devastating. Actually, it was a huge blow. It ruined my business. I ended up. I shouldn't have been so stubborn. I should have declared bankruptcy, but I refused to. I pushed through it. But it just really taught me a lesson that no matter how you run your life over, many, many years, one moment in time can unravel it all. So you have to be prepared for those moments. That taught me a lot. It carried over into business, into entrepreneurship. And it just taught me to make sure that I think things through a little more than what I may have in the past.
Was your reputation significantly tarnished and for long term, or was it just like a little skin?
I noticed it was tarnished for sure. I went from having a successful agency with over 20 staff to nothing in 48 hours. But the interesting thing about people is, as much as they love a good scandal, they also love when money is flowing. So the second that I was able to get myself back up and running, everybody was like, if I could do something for everybody again, everything was fine. Oh, that thing that you went through, no big deal, It's ridiculous.
And today it's something, it looks like, that you can look back on, smile, laugh a little bit, and just look forward.
You have to, it's, if you take life too seriously, you end up on some opioid or something that part of the crisis. I look at life as everything's a learning experience every day. I start off my checklist. First thing on my checklist every day is how to make the day extraordinary. Last thing on the checklist is, what did you learn today?
It's absolutely amazing. It seems like creativity for you plays a big part in everything you do. It seems very important to you. Is that true?
It's the beating heart of my business for sure. Yeah. And my life.
Yeah. Tell me why and what that means.
I think creativity is the true root to who we are as people. I think if you look at somebody's creative ideas, you can generally you can kind of get inside their mind a lot better than you can with any other aspect of their lives. It allows you to understand people a little bit better. And I find that if you can get into a job that has creativity, it doesn't even matter really how much money you're making because you are enjoying what you're doing. Creativity is key, I think, to everything, at least for me. Some people might not agree, but for me it is.
And you have found yourself playing the role of entrepreneur from a very early age. I said in my intro, you create 1 million pieces of content a year. How is that
Yeah.
possible? How can one do that?
Well, not me personally, myself and my staff, but yeah, we create 1 million pieces of content for our clients, our projects, blog content, 1 million pieces of content essentially. So it's just hard work. That's all it comes down to.
And that's sort of the nature of your business, right? It's this advertising agency.
Yeah, the large piece of it is content, exploration, content research and development, and then moving into actually the writing the content to engage people. Yeah.
And I also read that for your current business, you wrote, as a group, we are out of the box. That's what you get when you merge teachers, writers, designers, entrepreneurs, musicians, artists, and accountants. Why that mix? Why is that important?
I think it's largely because of my background. So I started out as when I was a young kid as a DJ. I moved into quickly to move in between the businesses I went from. So DJ and entertainment, garbage truck operator, picking up people's garbage on the side of roads in small communities. To my couple of day jobs, which would have been Subway sandwich artist. Then I moved into back into nightlife and promotions, and then politics, and then doing speaking engagements about political affiliation or business at high schools and things of that nature, and then moving into marketing full time. It exposed me to a lot of different types of people, and I learned the value of, not necessarily a guitar player can be an excellent guitar player, but in learning guitar, he learns other skills as well that a teacher wouldn't learn because they go through more of a traditional education system. So when you get all these people together in a room, you end up with everybody having ideas instead of what happens in a lot of corporations that I've been in meetings for, where everybody just goes, I don't know, sure, what that guy said. So our meetings are insanity. They're pure insanity. It's everybody's talking and trying to get their ideas in, and it's organized insanity for sure. But everybody comes to the table with something. Nobody feels like their ideas are too small or dumb or any. I'll look at anything really as a way to get things done.
Wow, that's very cool. I want to go back and connect these dots and see how you got this entrepreneurial mindset. I know it came about from an early age, but set that picture for us. What was life like growing up for you as a very young Jay Hall?
Okay, well, growing up, my parents were hard workers. My dad worked taking school pictures during the school year. And then one thing I left out in the intro when we talked was snow removal. And then in the summer, he would do lawn maintenance and framing pictures. My parents and then my mom worked for the government in low-income housing, finding people homes that didn't have a lot of money. They both worked well over 40 hours a week, every single week, probably 60 to 80. We led a very middle of the road life, very blue collar. It's not like I wanted for much, but that's because I didn't know to want for things that are out of reach. But we definitely didn't have access to, we couldn't go on a lot of vacations and things like that growing up, right? And I just looked at that and I said, boy, they're working so hard and they just continually stay in the same place. And that just wasn't okay with me. Once I got my first computer and I jumped on MIRC chat and I learned about the world outside of that middle of the road lifestyle, that was it for me. I had to make more of a life for myself.
Why do you think that is, that they couldn't get themselves out of it working so hard?
I think that there was a traditional look at what a good job was. It was go to work, punch in, punch out, get that pension, invest in your RSPs. I can't remember what RSPs are in where you guys are from, but the equivalent of a retirement plan essentially. And that was, have some kids, buy a house, have a mortgage for 150 years. That was all considered to be right, but then as I think the information age is what ended up doing it for a lot of people. You just get access to so much more. My mom, until I showed her a video on the internet, had never even heard of Belize and or in Bali and places like this, right? And then I show her videos. She's like, "Wow, this looks like heaven on earth." I said, "Yeah," and I'm going. So, that's just
Yeah.
kind of. I think that having access to so much information allowed me to say, "Hey, there's so much more here." I just can't. I cannot live this life and not step foot in every country. It's not something I'm going to do. I'm
Are,
going to step foot in every country.
and you're on your way to doing that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've taken a lot of time to travel.
What's the current number we're up to?
That's actually a good question. I haven't counted yet because I'm not close to the end, but it's high. I mean, I've done every country in North America and South America. And then I've been to the UK. Do we want to do the whole list? Been to the UK, been to the Ukraine. I've been to all sort of sunny locations, Australia. So I've been all over the place. Yeah.
And
I don't know.
this was for a mix of business and pleasure, just for your sake, and promise to yourself that I got to explore.
Yeah, exactly. And I do try to, I'm considering taking a 6-month cruise at some point that touches on 48 ports.
Hmm.
I do try to work business in so that I'm not falling behind on anything. But sometimes it's just for pleasure. But a lot of times I'll mix them. I'll mix the two. And it's amazing to go to Hawaii and go wingsuiting over a volcano, and then once you land, you jump on your laptop, do a couple hours work, then you go hit the beach and surf. I mean, that's life, right? That, to me, that's what I want my life to be like. Even if I'm not making an incredible amount of money in the future, if that's what I can do, then I'm fine with that.
Hmm. So now, going back to your teenage years, you told yourself this, watching your parents not rise above this middle ground, and you told yourself that I'm not going to live that life. What happened when you were 14?
You mean when I'm 12?
Oh, I thought
Or
you
the
met
garbage?
somebody. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah. Yep.
oh yeah. So I started DJing when I was 12, but at 14, I met somebody who ran a garbage business, and he was entrepreneurial. It was so I lived in a small town just outside of Winnipeg, Canada, and he serviced a bunch of the little towns around with a garbage bin. Just went around with a regular truck, throwing garbage in the back. Not even really an official business, but it wasn't meant to be an official business. It was meant to just get him through college. He was actually an engineer, but it became a full-time business, and he needed someone to help out with that business. So I was a kid, but I jumped in, and I mean, I learned. It was kind of interesting because he would stop the truck, get out, throw a bag in, have to go. Then when he had me, he's like, "Oh, well, do you mind being on the back of the truck?" And I said, "Yeah, that's
Mine. I
fine."
love it.
Yeah, exactly. So I went on the back of the truck, and then I figured out, I was like, well, I know the streets that don't really have a lot of heavy bags. A lot of these, older ladies, they have Safeway bags and things. So I started strapping my legs so that I could bend over to the side, grab the bags and throw them up without having to stop the truck and get off the truck. And then I feel like that was my first real business efficiency procedure I put in place in life. So, but a couple of those bags were really heavy, unsuspectedly, and I ended up falling off the truck. But it's a risk you take when you're in a high risk business, I guess.
Wow. Was this a
Yeah.
city job? Like, who was paying him to do
The residents. Yeah, it was an unregulated industry, so it was just
Oh,
people paying him $12 a month to come pick up their garbage. And eventually he got over 1,000 homes, and all of a sudden you have a real business on your hands, right? So then recycling programs and everything else comes into play. So yeah, it was very cool, and it was really being so young, not even having my driver's license yet at the very beginning of it. I was able to really tap into the beginnings of an entrepreneurial lifestyle with Dale Kellington. It was the name of the guy that ran the business, and everything was it was amazing.
How did you connect education at this point? Were you still deep in high school and looking towards a traditional education, or did you think, I don't need this?
I was a terrible student. I was the class clown. I was the guy that I was. The reason why is because I was bored. I was bored out of my mind the way that they were teaching. Everybody's heard this story. Many people echo my sentiments on this. It wasn't until I got into post-secondary, when I got into business school, that I started to excel. I was top 1% of my class. I won a scholarship. I won an office award, which allowed me to have an office for a year for free. But it was because of the way the teacher, his name was Jeff. He's since passed away, but the way he taught was so interesting because he would, when they give out assignments at school, whether it be university or high school or whatever, they give out everybody the same assignment. He didn't do that. He had an entrance interview with you to figure out what it is you wanted out of business. And then each lesson, he catered lessons to each and every one of us but same theme, same subject, but mine lent more to creativity. Whereas, somebody that was good with numbers and wanted to go into lend more to accounting side of things. And it ended up creating this really cool atmosphere where he would then get us all together at the end as a group project to work together and then submit the lesson as a group, as the whole class, as opposed to individual, so that all sides. And that's when I kind of adopted the policy that you need to get out of the box thinkers. You need to get people that wouldn't normally be in the room together, because that's when you get the best ideas.
Oh, I see that connection. That's absolutely amazing. So after that college experience, were you out into the real world creating your own business?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I already had what we will call a business at that time. I didn't know a lot. Once I got out of school, I realized, oh man, I didn't know anything. So I got into that's when I got big into event coordination. I'd done it before, but now it was serious. Now it wasn't something I was doing just for a little cash. And I was an awkward kid growing up. I was actually bullied a lot, and then when I got into the clubs and I started doing event coordination, all of a sudden girls were paying attention to me. It was fantastic. So after school, though, it's more than just girls and spending cash. It's an actual business. I could do this. So that's when I started to take off there.
What was this bullying thing you glossed over there?
Yeah, as a kid, I was beaten up a lot, pantsed. I got thrown into icy water over a bridge one time, which led to a really bad case of hypothermia. I was beat up a lot as a kid, very, very bullied. In small towns, I actually left the small town, went to the city, and that's where the bullying stopped. In small towns, there's really not a lot to do for kids, especially back then. There was none of this, right?
Right.
There was just drinking at parties, at bush parties, and picking on the smaller kid. And I was always a smaller kid until about grade 11 when I hit my growth spurt. But I just many times bloody noses, getting pantsed in the hallway, things like that. Pretty brutal childhood actually when it came to school.
Did you have anybody that you could tell and rely on for any sort of comfort? And I ask because, I for one went through similar things. I don't think that extreme, leading to the hypothermia and whatnot, but I always felt that I didn't have the outlet to then go to somebody for comfort and, stability on that front.
It's interesting because I think this podcast is turning into a theme of how the world is getting better. Growing up, it was ingrained in me. I don't think consciously by my father or my grandfather or anything, but I was around, my dad was a builder and he was a manly man, right? And my grandfather was almost 7 feet tall, wow, size 15 boots, an ass kicker. He'd gone to jail for putting his boss through a wall when he tried to beat up a black guy because that was, something that was acceptable back then, but not to my grandfather. My other grandfather was, as well a builder, very handsy, they were all manly men. So the thought of coming to any of them and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm getting beaten up." You know, I felt like I couldn't do it. So not their fault by any means. I'm sure if I had come to them, they would have helped me out. But I didn't feel like I could because of that stigma. Now I find, although sometimes it goes a little too far, now I find that guys don't have to have that anymore. It's not you don't have to be the manly man that, you know, the hunter gatherer. You can be something more. You can be a more emotionally evolved now, which is great. You know, I once dated a woman who had a 12-year-old son, and I could see how different his childhood was and how accepting people are now of, you know, boys not having to live up to that stigma. So that's great. I'm very happy about that. But no, I didn't have the ability to do that simply because of the stigma of what a man was.
Yeah, I totally relate to some of that. I have two small children myself, a 5-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old son, and I am consciously and deliberately raising them almost in the way that I didn't get. Like, I see some of the disconnect, so I deliberately give them certain attention and certain kinds of love and affection that I didn't get because I know how it felt not to receive it. So I compensate on that front. And then,
yeah, that's good. Great.
yeah,
That's wicked. Like that. That's exactly what every parent should be doing. So kudos
yeah.
to you.
Yeah. So now you're in this event coordination role. Seems like an absolute success.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first one was a failure. My first event, I lost $10,000 on it because that was my trust lesson. Trusted the wrong person with my call list for everybody who bought tickets, who then called and told everybody it was canceled right before the event.
Why? So then he could pocket the money or something, or what was the benefit?
No, because he ended up being a competitor that I didn't realize was a competitor.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So that was messy. You know, that was actually my first event. I was almost 17 at the time. And then, like I said, it was just kind of something I did. And then after school, I got into it more seriously, doing concerts. You know, we did a lot of big artist concerts here in Winnipeg. Launching a lot of really popular multi-year club nights that happened. So it was, it was very successful. It started out pretty rough, but it got to the point where it was so successful that my marketing ended up being, for one of my event companies, ended up being 100% run on MSN Messenger. It was 40,000 teenagers. I was at the time 19, 20, 21,
Wow.
something like that. Yeah, and we just sat on MSN all day and talked to them, and we packed parties every single month. It was like clockwork. We $0 advertising spend. It was fantastic, and I did that. Then it evolved to MySpace, something called Nexopia, which was like Canadian Facebook at the time, and then Facebook came along, and I remember I held these what were called Facebook parties. So I loved the platform so much that I wanted other people to be on it. Nobody in my city was on it. So I had a photographer coming around taking pictures of everybody. And they said, "Oh, how can I get the pictures?" I said, "Just go on Facebook." "What's Facebook?" I said, "Go on Facebook." I'm telling you, sign up and you're going to love it. It's very addictive. So we ended up doing that. And then this is how I got into marketing as a whole. Other companies started going, "Well, what is he doing over there? I don't understand how I just started a business page and I've started a profile at the time. I've only got like 3 friends and this guy's maxed out at 5,000 already. What's happening?" You know, so they started contacting me. "How'd you do this?" I said, "Well, I know, but you know, it's that old line. And when you're good at something, you don't do it for free." So I said, "You know, if you pay me, I can do it for you too." And that's how I evolved out of event coordination into full-time marketing.
And isn't that the trick, really, to get people to sort of engage with you, is to do it, right? You have to do it first, show that you can get the results.
Proof of concept. Yep. Core business strategy. Yeah, for sure. I looked at, you know, it was interesting because when Facebook came out, in Canada at least, I had picked it up because I had a VPN. So I picked it up in the States before it came to Canada. And I started playing around with it. My few American friendly friends and family were on it. And I just found it to be so interesting because I looked at it, I said, okay, I think that this platform is going to eliminate the need for posters and flyers. And there was nothing worse than living through a minus 50-degree winter in Winnipeg and having to go around and put posters up on boards that you knew in your soul nobody was looking at, but you did it anyways because that was part of the industry. And I looked at Facebook as a way to get away from all that, and that's absolutely what it did for us.
So what is the nature of your business today? This is what you're doing today is Sync Digital Solutions. That's your business with how many people work with you?
We have 16 right now, 16 people. So we're almost at the levels I was at prior to the election. We are in a better spot in terms of financially, but our team is much tighter now. So we have 16 people. Sorry, what was the question again? I got distracted. My staff tried to walk in the room. So
that's okay. Cool. Just the nature of your business today.
Okay. So we have two sides of the business. There's the client side model, which is we do website design, development, SEO, and digital marketing, social media, email marketing, things like that. And then the other side of the business is projects based, which is where we get really creative, which is where I utilize. So I use the client. I've always used the client side as the stability of the company. And then the projects are what I feel like doing, I'm going to do. So the best example of that right now, the current project we have out there is it's called Diobo, DIYOBO. It's a online ticketing platform. For small, medium-sized businesses, definitely not the size of Ticketmaster, but we do well. It actually started out as a friend of mine wanted, or a guy actually at the time that I didn't know was doing a ticketing website. I did a lot of events, so he contacted me, said, "Hey, I'm thinking about putting together this ticketing website." So that's awesome. If you need any insight, so we worked together a little bit. I was the first customer of the site. Fast forward to post-election, I'm looking for something to really sink my teeth into. I buy Diobo from him. So, and then the goal was to get it. He built it in 2008. In 2016, at the end of 2016, when I took it over, it hadn't had any maintenance done in that time frame. So the site was the exact same site in 2008 to 2016. The goal was up until November of last year to get the current functionality up and running. And then now the goal is to get version 3 out there by the summer. And version 3 is going to be, I've looked at all the sites, I've looked at all the features, the most feature rich for event coordinators ticketing platform on the web.
I love all that. You might have touched upon this at some story we've already spoken about, but one of the whole idea of the hidden entrepreneur was when I realized all of my life I was hiding the best parts of myself, showing up with a mask on because I was, hiding behind fear, wanted to appeal to everybody else in the way that I thought they wanted and needed, which, makes this null and void. A lot of dark times trying to get through. What is one real dark moment that you really found yourself in that you had to get through, and how in the world did you get through it?
I know exactly the moment. I was living in one of my mom's buildings at Manitoba Housing, so low-income housing. And I was trying to, spend properly, but my expenses were higher than my income coming in with my business. And I couldn't quite figure out. So I took a day job. At Chapters. And it was in the music department, natural fit. But that wasn't giving me enough money either. So I was constantly in a cash flow problem. Even though I had the job, I had the little cute vest that they give you, and I was still trying to be entrepreneurial, but the job was taking so much away from being entrepreneurial. I was finding it hard to even afford food at that point in time. So as what I ended up doing was I ended up meeting the manager of a 7-Eleven right down the street from my place, because pretty much all I could afford was big bites and bags of chips. So he said to me one day, he goes, "Oh, I love this style of music that we carried at Chapters." So I said to him, this is my first barter, first entry into barter. So at Chapters, we were given massive steep discounts, like 80% off of music. And then we had, I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was 6 free CDs a week, essentially. So I took that discount and those 6 free CDs and I offloaded them to him. And then he allowed me to come to 7-Eleven and do grocery shopping once a week. So I was starting to be able to eat. It took away that stress of that particular, I mean, not eat well, of course, it's shopping at 7-Eleven after all, but,
Wow.
you know, I was able to eat, and all of a sudden I had, an extra 50, 60, 70 bucks a week that I could put in. And I used that 50, 60, 70 extra dollars a week, to book better class of DJs for my events. And that's when my events started to take off, because
Whoa.
now I wasn't just doing it myself and trying to run the event. And that always ended up screwing up because I had to be 2-3 different people in one night, or just inviting my friends who barely knew how to DJ. Now all of a sudden I was getting real DJs on my shows, and people started to take notice of that. And that's what ended up really catapulting me in event coordination as well, would be that stage of struggling to eat, finding that way of bartering to get that expense out of my life, putting that expense into my business, and allowing myself to grow.
You seem to be resourceful AF. Is that true?
Isn't every entrepreneur, I think.
So
You
talk
know,
to me.
like,
Yeah, how important?
well, I look at you. You said you were hiding, hiding
Yeah.
that piece of you. The last time I did that in my life was when I had that corporate job where I was sitting on a board, with a bunch of guys, mandated to wear a tie and all these things. And I just looked at it and I said, this is just, at some point you have to admit, I think everybody has something in their life, whether it be, admitting what your sexuality is, admitting what your talents are, if they're super weird talents, or admitting what you are at your core. And what I am at my core is a very independent person. So, what I did was, after my friends held this intervention to show me how miserable I was, I left that corporate job. I went down to the States. I spent that time, trying to basically just decompress, right? I took a nice little severance. I had some breathing room, and I just decompressed. And I just thought about, who do I actually want to be when I wake up in the morning? And that's when I said, I cannot be happy in this life without being an entrepreneur. And from that point forward, I only had a severance package that I was bleeding through like crazy because I was living in Vegas. And so now I had to sit down and say, okay, how do I do this? So I had to, my condo was nothing but lists all over the walls, similar to what I have in my office now. But it was lists of, what are my resources I have at my disposal? How can I use those to my maximum benefit to create more resources? So I think that's what every entrepreneur struggles with, right? How do I turn $1 into 2, into 4, into 8, into 16, and 32, and so on? And how do I take this one little idea I have, this tiny little idea, this baby of mine, and turn it into a full-blown, business that actually can provide for me and mine, right? So resourcefulness, I say, creativity is important to me at my core as a person, and allows me to be able to function and allows me to be happy. Resourcefulness is key to being successful, I think.
And are those the ways we turn $1 into 2, 2 into 4, and take this little idea and make it flourish?
Absolutely. Having the ability to be the person you want to be makes you happy. When you're happy, you can do a lot more with your life. So you open up that tap to the resources to be able to create more and more resources. I think I think those two things are very fundamental. Now, again, creativity is it for me. Some people don't have any interest in being creative, and some businesses don't require it. Whatever that is that makes you happy is the first thing you have to find, because the struggles are easier that way. And, you can get through them because you're like, well, yes, I'm struggling. This month, I'm making a decision between this expense and this expense. But I can also get up when I want to get up. I can do what I want to do. There's a lot more. When you have freedom, you're happier. That allows you to get through the hard times better. And it opens up your mind to saying, okay, what do I have to do to get from A to B to C to D, right? So.
Yeah, I love that. Looking back on a younger version of yourself, what advice would you give that person?
Take life a lot more seriously. I did not, I look back at my childhood, and I was pretty oblivious, actually.
Mm.
As a kid, I didn't quite I remember there was a moment, my papa had passed away when I was 12, and we had to move into his house, and my parents came to me and said, or to him and my grandma's house, and my parents came to me and said, are you okay with this? Yeah, sure. I mean, what do I know? Sure, I'm fine with it. I'm moving to a bigger house. I mean, what do I care? And then I over for a couple of years after we moved in, it really, the weight of living in his home crushed me, and it created, I don't know if I was ever a depression, but I definitely was in a dark place. It was hard to go to the funk of waking up every day to, it was just, there was a smell to it that I associated with him. His art was hanging on the walls. I was using his computer. You know, the last painting he ever did was a painting of a cartoon character I created as the mascot for my elementary school. You know, there was so much of him around me that it really just made life very, very hard. And what ended up happening was I think it caused me to put my head in the hole in the ground, so to speak. And I just didn't really understand the gravity of situations. I didn't understand how important this step was to the next step, to the next step. And yeah, if I could go back, I actually think about this often, because one of the books I want to write is where somebody gets a second chance knowing what they know that day, and they get rewound to being 11, 12 years old, which is around the time when I went through all my change with my grandfather. So I think about it often. That is the one thing that I know was, you know, off with me as a kid, essentially.
Wow, it's beautiful. Do you believe that everything happens for a reason?
No. Well, okay, I should qualify that comment. I don't believe everything happens for a reason, but I believe that when you start to motivate yourself into a particular direction, you're going to recruit into your life elements that will enhance that, whatever you're trying to do.
For better or worse, right?
For better or for worse, yes. So I think that life has a way of showing you, you know, for example, of nightclubs. I was in nightclubs, and there was a period of time where I did 6 nights a week for years. I was always in the nightclubs. And then I started to get these marketing clients, but I didn't want to work with them. I wanted to be in nightclubs still. So I kept turning them away. And finally, one of the managers of a nightclub that I was working with sat down with me, and he said, "I'm leaving." I said, "Oh, why are you leaving?" He said, "We can only do this for so long. And this, and this happened. And it really showed me I got to get out of this, because this isn't a long-term solution to anything." He told me that. And the next day, I ended up getting approached in that same club. This is now night 2, by somebody who was like, he said the words to me. He goes, "I want you to work with my company because I believe this is not your long-term solution. Working with us is your long-term." Oh, okay. I'm following the breadcrumbs here. And working with him is what this guy's when I'm getting me out of nightclubs and getting me into full-time marketing. And, you know, I try to watch for signs, and I believe the signs come as a result of energy. I know that we're getting pretty hippy dippy here, but I think that you know, there's positive and negative energy, and you can go towards either at any time. But if you keep moving in that positive direction and you're cognizant of that, you're going to end up in a much better place if you watch for it, if you pay it. It's really about being assertive and paying attention, being proactive in your life.
For the record, I'm all for hippy dippy.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we're here.
Yeah, exactly. And here's hippy dippy. Are you?
Fucking a guy did ayahuasca in a cave in Nevada. Trust me, I'm hippy dippy when I want to be.
Now I'm going to rewind my next question. Tell me more.
You know, I'm a huge fan of creative thinkers, and Steve Jobs being definitely up there as one of the more creative, kind of an asshole, but if I can say that. But you know, he was he could take something that regular people just would look at and say, "Oh yeah, let's just try to throw it on a flyer and see what happens." He built these lavish creative campaigns. I mean, he revolutionized the music industry, the computer industry, so many things. And I started reading up on him, and I started reading up on all these other big CEOs. And the one thing I found in common is that they did hallucinogens, and that's something that they could point to as really helping crack that part of their brain that allowed them to be more creative. So I looked at what I thought would be the safer of the hallucinogens, and I thought being administered by a real shaman from Peru in a cave in the Mojave Desert with 3,000-year-old ancient Indian petroglyphs around you was probably the best way to do it, instead of doing mushrooms in somebody's basement. So I decided to go on that journey, and I did it, and I am eternally grateful to it, to the process. 8 hours of self-discovery in the most profound ways is life-changing. Absolutely. I made phone calls to people afterwards and I said, I know you did this. I don't appreciate it. If you want to stay in my life, you have to do this, this, and this to fix it. And they would come back, on the other end of the phone going, what? How do you even know about that? And I'm like, when you talk to someone and you get this feeling in the back of your mind, you're like, oh God, they're just not telling me the whole story here. Like there's something wrong. I'm missing data. Ayahuasca allowed me to get all that data out of my subconscious and plug it right in the front of my mind. It's why there's a lot of divorces after ayahuasca experiences, because they realize, oh man, he or she has been cheating on me for years and I've been letting them get away with it. So it really opened up my eyes to a lot of things. Most importantly, it probably is what led me to realize that I have to embrace the positive energies and figure out how to kick off the negative energies in a really assertive way. I think that was probably the best lesson from it.
Where are you going? 3 steps in the future, 20 years down the road. Do you even see something that you want to accomplish or do? And I never really asked this question, but something about you is like very intriguing to say, because it seems like you're so well versed, right? Well traveled. What are you still looking to do, big time?
So I have 2 big goals. The first one is to change the world by revolutionizing an industry, which is what is on my wall. Actually, I can look at it right now. This is the idea that we're sitting on, and it is a amalgamation of all my learning experiences, looking at industries, going to Silicon Valley, working within the walls of those offices at Facebook, Netflix, Google, and so I that's number one. Number 2, after I get to that point, I want to travel and write, and I want to write about things that people generally don't. And I don't want to write as in write books. I want to write blogs about things that people generally don't hear about. I think that we've become, while we are in this information age where we know we have access to everything, we are very surface level with it. And, like I've always said, my dream vacation is going to Iraq. And that sounds insane, but when I ran my event coordination company that was run on MSN for teenagers, at that time, we had taken on a lot of Iraq refugees in Winnipeg. And I met a couple of them, and I started talking to them about, these kids, about what was it like in Iraq? Because this was, Gulf War time, and this is, everything was a mess over there. And this one kid came to one of our boat cruises. We did a party on one day. He came a couple hours early. He said, hey, he brought his dad. And he said, I want to show you what Iraq looked like before the war. And he started showing me these pictures. I'm looking at them going, this could be downtown Winnipeg. This could be the park down the street. This could be any town USA, so to speak, right? And it really hit home with me, because then he showed me what everything looked like before they fled Iraq, and it was an absolute war zone. Their home was gone. That park was a crater, and I went, holy crap, this is insane. And then he started telling me stories about his family. The family decided to stay and, against all odds, defend their homes. The family and friends that were fleeing into caves, all these different elements. So I feel like in Iraq, you probably right now have so many different types of personalities that people that you would never experience in, let's say, Canada or the US, because we've never had this happen. That I really want to go in. I want to take a very deep dive into those types of cultural dichotomies and write about them, and just expose at least the people that are interacting with me to a different side of the story, because I know from personal experience, there's more than one side, and that one side that's generally told is generally pretty surface level.
Wow. Those are fantastic next steps for you. Absolutely incredible. Yeah. Wow.
Looking forward to the future.
Wow. Shouldn't we all be? That's amazing that you can. What do you believe happens when it's all over, when our time here on Earth comes to an end?
Oh, that is it. God, I spend a lot of time thinking about that. I wish I could say I had a clear answer. I don't. I see. I did not expect you to throw that question at me. Let's see here. I think that somewhere in between the stories of religion and science is a kind of like where it settles in. I think while I'm not a religious person by any means, I respect religion in that what it can do for some people. When my mom went through a tough time, she started going to church, and the community of church really helped her. Not necessarily the stories that come out of the Bible. I've read the Bible, I've read the Quran, I've read Old and New Testament, I've read them right through. And I did that because I wanted to make sure that I was making an educated decision on how I live my life. And then I became a big believer in science in probably grade 11, grade 12. It's an energy transference of some sort. What that is, I don't know. Whether that's whether you ascend to something greater, whether this life is a lesson, and how you live it determines where you go next. I'm not sure, but the one thing I can settle on is the fact that I believe that energy doesn't die, and that we end up in another form in some way, whether that be a star, whatever that is. I don't think we consciously end when our bodies die.
Well, on that note, I will leave you with this one final question. Jay Hall, how would you like to be remembered?
How would I like to be remembered? Well, as a contributor. I'd like to be remembered as a contributor, somebody that did something positive that allowed at least a few. Let me say this. When I ran the teen event company, we would always be on MSN Messenger with these kids, as I spoke about. And one night, the conversations were at a wall. So I started messaging people around. Hey, what's up? Are you coming to the party? And I messaged this kid named Jason. And it took a few minutes, but he came on and we started chatting and everything. And it wasn't until years later, when I went through the political crisis, the scandal, he came forward and said the night that I had messaged him and we ended up talking, he was headed to the bathroom to have a bath with a toaster.
No way. No way. Chills. Go ahead.
I know. So now he has kids, he's married, he has a farm, he's living a great life. I would like to do more of that. That would be how I'd like to be remembered.
Literally chilling. Wow. There's just so much to that. You have no idea what your actions or lack thereof are doing, are influencing. Wow.
Absolutely.
And you found out years later. Random.
Yeah. It was a moment because he came forward and he was trying to get people to hear the story so that they could get a little bit more insight into me. And he told the story, and somebody told me that he told the story. So I hadn't spoken to him in years. So I contacted him. I reached out. I said, hey, I'm hearing this story. Is this true? We got together. We had lunch. It was a very tearful lunch. It was very, raw humanity can be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's leave it at that. A very beautiful moment. Well, thank you, Jay Hall. Really appreciate you. I saw from the very beginning of this dialogue, like I said a few minutes ago, a lot of intrigue with you, a lot of magnificent beauty from you. And I'm excited to see and absorb everything that you continue to do. Thank you for sharing you and spending the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was way more interesting than I thought an entrepreneurial podcast would end up being about me as an entrepreneur. So that's awesome. You asked great questions.
Well, thank you. And that's part of the secret I don't usually let on as we get going, but then I slowly but surely try to pull that out. So thank you for going there. Thank you for being part of this, creating this beautiful space and dialogue together today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us live, for tuning in to the recording, for supporting us in every way. If you got something out of this, take one small step and put something out into the world. Take a step in the right direction. A piece of action will do just fine for your goals. We're going to do another episode not too far behind. Until we do, thank you so much for tuning in. Until we meet again, Go get them.